The NFL playoffs resume this weekend with the divisional round. We will see the top seeds in both conferences on the field for the first time in this postseason. Starting on Saturday, the Bills and the Broncos. This line has kind of fluctuated.
Oh, yeah.
It's open with the Bills, now with the Broncos. So the money's been moving either way. A couple of days before game time here. Broncos right now, the 1.5-point favorite as the number 1 seed. And then it's the third date between the Seattle Seahawks and San Francisco 49ers. They open the season with one another. They close the season with one another. The Seahawks get the 1 seed, so they'll get the game at home. They're a touchdown favorite over the Niners. Then in the AFC, it's the New England Patriots coming off their win over the Chargers last week. We'll face the Houston Texans, who won on Monday night against the Pittsburgh Steelers, a field goal favorite for Drake May, Mike Vrabel and company. And the LA Rams, they are a favorite on the road as the team from the
only
city
underdog.
Yes.
Only underdog is a favorite.
And that is so interesting to me because that game is in Chicago.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be cold, and that is a West Coast team going there. But keep in mind, the Rams, they beat Philly last year in the cold. I think that game was snowing last year. So I was a bit surprised when I saw the line, just mainly because you don't normally see those teams that from warm weather cities go to super cold weather cities and be the favorite just because you expect the elements to play a part.
Well, I think the game that you were talking about was the divisional last year that the Eagles ended up. I do believe the Eagles ended up winning, but I think that they gave Philadelphia the toughest fight in the entire playoffs.
Yes, that's what I meant. It played well.
You look at the Washington game, and for a second I thought Jayden Daniels and company were going to be able to get it done because they did end up getting one win in the regular season last year against the Eagles, but that's also the game that Jalen Hurts, I believe, threw 4 interceptions and then left with an injury, so you had Kenny Pickett come in and play the second half, and that just was never going to go well. But I think when you look at this Rams team, they were 10.5-point favorites last week, and they were in danger of losing to the Carolina Panthers, who finished with a record below 500.
Right.
And, I mean, this is a Rams team that has Super Bowl aspirations, especially with Matt Stafford playing at an MVP caliber. Don't know. We won't know for a few more weeks if he does end up winning the MVP. I wouldn't be surprised if it was him. I wouldn't also be surprised if it was Drake May.
Yeah, same here. And I think that this is – everybody has been calling this a wide open AFC because there's no Patrick Mahomes and there is no Lamar Jackson in these playoffs. So I find the 1 seed very interesting here in the Denver Broncos looking to avenge the loss from last year.
Yeah.
But for Josh Allen, this is a monster playoff game for him as well because, like I said, it seems like, hey, no Joe Burrow, no Lamar Jackson, no Patrick Mahomes. It feels like the MVP should be able to take over here. I am the most intrigued. Of course, I'm a Patriots fan. I'll admit that. But I'm the most intrigued about this game, about this Bills Broncos game because of the expectations. And I think a lot of people think, and this is no disrespect to the Broncos, I think people think that this is not the strongest number 1 seed ever, especially with Bo Nix there at quarterback.
Well, I mean, everybody makes a lot about 2026, and everyone wants to compare it to 2016. And, I mean, it does kind of feel like it's 2016 again. Yeah. The Broncos and the Seahawks both with the number 1 seed in their respective conferences. But you could also make the same argument about the Seahawks.
Yep.
Are you really a 1 seed with Sam Darnold at quarterback? People still don't believe in him, even though he's shown that, especially in Minnesota, besides the last few weeks of the season.
And that's why.
He still has had a couple of off games down the stretch with Seattle this year, but that defense is just so good. I think this game there's more on the line for the Bills if they lose. Like, if the Bills lose, that's going to tarnish their reputation a little bit more than if the Broncos do, because this is year 2 under Bo Nix. He really has taken that leap this year. He had a great year last year, led Denver to the playoffs. Obviously, we just talked about that wild card loss last season. Now they have a chance to avenge that loss in the divisional here this year.
And Coach Sean Payton has been very high on Bo Nix for a long time. I think if you watch Bo Nix in college, both at Auburn and at Oregon, I don't know if anybody thought we'd be seeing him deep in NFL playoffs.
No.
I certainly did not. But one thing he is good, and I think these two are very good for each other, is that Sean Payton runs a system that is so well designed that it makes Bo Nix's job a lot easier. Yeah. And I think that he's able, where Bo Nix is able, and I don't mean to diminish his talent, but I think he's able to color within the lines enough to be able to run this offense, and the genius of this offense is Sean Payton and the defense.
Yeah, and I think the one thing, though, that worries me a little bit about this Denver team is I almost want to relate it back to Dak Prescott's rookie year, where they had the first-round bye, they had the wild card bye, and then they played in the divisional, and it's just sometimes people talk about how a young quarterback, you don't really want them to have that extended layoff. Maybe if you're like an older team that's been there before, it works in your favor a little bit. But, I mean, you look at the last 5 games they played, they only won by 7 against the Raiders, who hold the number 2 overall pick, or number 1 overall pick, I believe. Right? The
Raiders are 1 overall.
Number 1 overall pick. You beat Green Bay by 8. You lost to Jacksonville. That's not a terrible loss. But you struggled with Kansas City without Patrick Mahomes, and they were on their 3rd-string quarterback. And then you struggled with the Chargers. It's just all signs lead to a little bit of a shaky game here for Denver. And do you trust R.J. Harvey to be that lead back for this team? Because Bo Nix has proven that he's been able to get it done early in the season.
Right.
It just feels like this team, they were going downhill. They had their foot off the gas here for a little bit, and they're starting to sputter out here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that this is not usually when your number 1 seeds have been dominating throughout the course of the year. This team is not dominating throughout the course of the year, but they're winning the games, though.
That's true.
And Sean Payton is a championship coach. He won a championship with the New Orleans Saints, looking to do the same with the Denver Broncos. He talked about those Buffalo Bills who will face on Saturday.
I've got a ton of respect, and I consider Sean a good friend in this profession. He was back with Andy and Philly and the late Jim Johnson, and Steve Spagnuolo, Sean McDermott. Jim was one of the finest coordinators our league's had a few, but he was a special guy, and you could see the impact he's had on these. And I'm not saying younger defensive coaches, but shoot, these guys that were all getting older. But I think a lot of him have a ton of respect for him, the team. And then you study the opponent and, obviously the quarterback, but all elements of the team differently than, as you sit there and you look at how the Chargers line up and play, front coverage, offense, they're different type teams.
Meanwhile, let's flip this thing over to the Bills, because this might be the most compelling 6th seed probably in NFL history. And I haven't seen so much love because, like we said, when the initial lines came out, the Bills were the favorite. I haven't seen so much pressure, so to speak, on a team that did not win their division, that come in as a 6th seed, and now have to go on the road to Mile High in altitude to go win a game. How much pressure do you think is on this team as they try to get that win there on the road?
I don't know, because I feel like, the demons of the past are out of the playoffs here this year. You see that on the lower third there. 5 of his 6 losses in the playoffs have come to either Kansas City or Cincinnati, and the other one was, I believe, Houston in his first year. So you're looking for your first Super Bowl appearance. You take down Jacksonville, who has a pretty good defense here, and can you keep it rolling against Denver? Who knows?
Absolutely. Sean McDermott is the head coach of this football team, and I think there's been talked about him as this team moves forward. You heard it from Coach Sean Payton just a moment ago talking about Sean McDermott. Here's Coach.
Yeah, you could see it on the tape. You're checking boxes. Brandon and myself, as we're going through it, and he saw him. He got a chance to see him obviously before I did, and I remember Brandon saying he stood next to him in the end zone at pregame warm-ups. He's like, you wouldn't believe how big this guy is. But big does not necessarily mean tough. So the toughness part is you're watching tape and you're seeing the toughness part come out pretty clear.
So, I mean, you got to have this wondering because, I just talked about how Buffalo, they've lost to Kansas City a few times. It seems like, Patrick Mahomes, he always loses to Josh Allen in the regular season. But when you flip it forward towards the playoffs, that's when it seems like, Patrick Mahomes is able to get it done. So, I mean, you don't have him anymore. And then you also don't have Joe Burrow, who, I mean, again, like the Chiefs, are able to, or like the Chiefs, they lose in the regular season to the Bills, but the Bills are just able to get it done in the end. So it's just, I don't know, because it almost feels like this has to be the year for Josh Allen.
Yeah.
You look at these last 5 playoff results. You lost in the AFC Championship game in 2020. That was the Stephon Diggs staring celebration one. And they didn't really get back. They never got back with Stephon Diggs. 3 straight losses in the AFC Divisional, all to Kansas City and Cincinnati, and then that AFC Championship game lost last year.
I was watching a show, and I forget which one it was now. It was one of the debate shows, and they were talking about the quarterbacks with the most playoff wins without a Super Bowl appearance. Josh Allen is the number 1 in the entire NFL. But the reason why that is noteworthy is because the graphic you just showed, all the times they've been close and lost.
Yeah.
I think back to that game where it was the 13-second game, everybody calls it, and obviously Josh Allen goes down, Patrick Mahomes comes back to score in 13 seconds. I don't think we'll get those kind of fireworks in this season, but I do feel like if you're going to ask yourself one question about this game, it's who you trust more.
Yeah.
And it's a good question because while I do trust Josh Allen, there's parts of me that says, hey, this is the best defense that he'll probably face all year. I mean, Patrick Surtain and this crew is so good.
Yeah.
Does he have to put on the cape? Can they count on James Cook? Like, how much will he have to do on Saturday in order to come up with the upset win?
The only thing is, like, I would almost argue that Jacksonville had a better defense. I mean, when you look at it down the stretch, the last half of the season, by the stats, they had the best defense in the NFL. But the thing is, when I looked at that game and when I was watching it and I went back and watched the tape again, Josh Allen took a beating. In that game. I mean, he got roughed up. He put his body on the line, but he's good to go here this week. But it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you like to see Josh Allen put his body on the line, but how sustainable is that?
Right.
And it's not like he's getting old by any means.
No,
he's
still in the middle of his prime.
Yeah, it's just still. I've seen Tony Romo's career get cut short by a few injuries, and it feels like when Josh Allen puts his body on the line, it's just one bad mistake, one bad tackle, and you're out for what could be a few months, but then this injury could end up lingering later and later into the career. I think I trust Josh Allen just a little bit more, though, just because he's beaten this team last year. They had a pretty, I think I want to say 70% of the defensive players were there last year.
Right.
Again, it was at home. The Buffalo Bills finished undefeated at home, but it's still, I almost feel like you have to trust Josh Allen because he's been here before. He's done this for so many years.
Right.
And the only teams he can't do it against aren't in the playoffs.
Exactly. All those teams are now out. It is worth noting that Denver has one home loss. That one home loss is to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah.
Buffalo just beat them last week. So you can make an argument.
And
when
it was
people
2 touchdowns, too, that they lost by.
Right. Exactly. So I think that the path is open for Josh Allen to be able to make the Super Bowl and get this team back into the Super Bowl.
I have to go through your Patriots.
They will have to go through the Patriots, and they will not. And they'll have to be on the road the entire time as well. Have to go, obviously went to Jacksonville, have to go to Denver, and then they'll have to go to New England if that's the way that it shakes out. Or even if the Texans, if the Texans win, they'll have that game at home. No, that game will be in Houston.
Yep.
Because Houston's the 5 and Buffalo is the 6. In this game, I have been back and forth. I think I got Buffalo.
What's the score?
Close.
24-21. I'm going to make a bold prediction here. And this is kind of like the heat check for me right now.
Okay, I like it.
Buffalo wins this game. Josh Allen has a nice game. They win 34-21.
They score 34 in that defense.
Because Khalil Shakir has a Gabe Davis against Chiefs type game where he just goes crazy.
Just goes insane. Yeah.
Keon Coleman hasn't been the guy that they thought he was going to be. We talked about Auburn and some of these other SEC men's basketball teams needing a leader to step up. Keon Coleman's late to some things. He just hasn't been that. Khalil Shakir over 130 receiving yards. I've got him on my my fantasy,
Nice.
my playoff fantasy. So I'm hoping for that. But I've been on a heater. Sometimes, you just got to go for the knockout punch here.
Yeah, and you'll certainly do so, and especially if that hits, because you have been on a roll here in college basketball. We'll try to keep that roll going.